Shall I start?
Yes, you get to start.
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that I am so delighted and honored to be part of this festival. It just filled with vibrant, positive energy, and I cannot believe the spectacular aesthetic. So, so happy to be here. I thought what I would do is start by just telling you a little bit about my own background and upbringing, just so you know where I'm coming from, and also how, a lot of people ask me, how did a Yale law professor who usually writes about globalization and foreign policy end up being the notorious Tiger Mother? And I think there are lots of misunderstandings. Several people have said to me, I thought you were going to look like a witch. So I was born in the United States, but my parents were immigrants. They were Chinese immigrants who arrived in the United States in 1960 to be graduate students. And like many immigrants, my parents worked incredibly hard and were very poor and saved every penny. I remember seeing my father stay up till 3 in the morning every night, working furiously. And I know that he wore the same pair of shoes for 8 years. As parents, my mom and dad were typical of immigrants in the United States. They demanded total respect and were very tough with my 3 younger sisters and me. In fact, the famous list that was published in the Wall Street Journal that got me in so much trouble, you know, no play dates, straight A's, no sleepovers, that list, which I intended to be a little funny or tongue-in-cheek, that list was applied to me and my sisters straight, with no humor. Every day after school, we had to come straight home, we had to do chores, we had to drill math and piano. We were required to speak only Chinese at home. It was a strict rule. For every English word that we accidentally said, we got 1 whack of the chopsticks on the hand. Our grades had to be perfect. If we got a 99 out of 100, my mom would say, "What happened to the 1 point? Let's work on that." We always had to take the hardest classes. It's funny, I see people now trying to take the easy classes. My mom and dad made us take double the load, always the hardest classes. Socially, my parents were really strict. No boyfriends, no sleepovers. And you have to understand the sleepovers. It's part of an immigrant mentality. My parents didn't know anybody in the country. So when I said, "Mom, can I go to a slumber party?" I remember my mom said, "But Amy, I don't understand. We have a bed here for you. Why do you need to go to someone else's house to sleep?" I don't know if do you have prom, senior prom here? High school prom? Yes? So I'll tell you one story. When I was a senior, I was invited to the prom, but my father said I couldn't go. My mother begged, and finally my father capitulated, agreed that I could go on one condition, that I be back home by 9 p.m., which is when everybody else was just going. So I went to the prom, I came back by 9 p.m., and then I snuck out a window. But despite all the complaints, my sister and I growing up, we would say, "Why are there crazy rules? Why are they so strict?" But the strategy worked with us, all 3 of us. Today, I adore my parents. Knock on wood, they're almost 80 years old, but they're still fine. And today, if anything goes wrong, a rejection, something bad, my parents are the first people that I call, the first people. We voluntarily vacation together with my parents, and most importantly, I feel so grateful to them. I love my job. I feel I've had opportunities all my life. I've been so lucky, and I really owe it all to them. So now I think, looking back, although it wasn't always fun growing up, my parents, having had such high expectations for me, not letting me make excuses, that is the greatest gift that anyone has ever given me. And that's why, even though my husband is not Chinese, I wanted to try to raise my own 2 daughters the same way that my parents raised me. Now, with my first daughter, it was easy. She was just a self-motivated kid. I never had to even be strict with her. But then my second daughter came along. And I know there are many parents out there, you know how different children can be, completely different personalities. And my second daughter was incredibly difficult. I felt like she was born saying no. She fought about everything. Even when I was pregnant, she was kicking really hard. And and we're also very similar in personalities. Hot-tempered, so I think we always locked horns. I remember one very funny story. She was about 6 and we were practicing violin. And at one point, Lulu says, "Stop it, Mommy, just stop it." And I said, "What? What did I do, Lulu? I didn't say anything. I didn't say a single word." And Lulu said, "Your brain is annoying me." I know what you're thinking. And she was right. I was thinking her elbow was too high, her phrases were not right. Most of the book is supposed to be funny, but the last third of the book is totally different. And this, I think, a lot of people don't know, because I think the media only looked at the first 10 pages of the book. But when my daughter and I always, we got along great. We always made up, hugged in bed. But when she turned 13, something universal happened. She rebelled, seriously rebelled, and it was not funny. She became incredibly angry and alienated and rude and made huge scenes. And I don't want to give it away, but the culminating chapter of the book, it's in Red Square, Moscow. We have a huge fight where I suddenly realized, oh my God, I may lose my daughter. I may just lose her. And when I thought of it that way, I didn't care about grades or violin, I just wanted my daughter. And that's when I pulled back. We made a lot of compromises. We had a big talk. But I held very firm. I mean, it's a working struggle, very high on academic standards still. So the point is that it was the day after that huge fight that I started writing this book. I just went to my computer and the whole thing just poured out. I wrote the Tiger Mom book in 3 months. The whole thing just poured out. It was like therapy. And I showed every page to my both daughters and my husband. So the Tiger Mom book was never intended as a parenting manifesto. It was really just the story of my own journey as a mother, trying to hold to my parents' standards, adopt their values, while adjusting to the very different personalities of my 2 daughters. And in some ways, and this is what I want to talk about, trying to combine the best of East and West. And this is what I'll say, and then I'll turn it over to Esther for some questions. I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I think that the Asian countries and the Western countries have opposite parenting and education problems, exactly the opposites. And you'll be interested to know that I go to China and Korea all the time. I'm going to Korea next week, and their conferences when they ask me to speak, it's always about exactly the opposite. It's never self-esteem. It's never discipline. It's always, how can we have more creativity? How can we get our children to think outside the box? How can we have leaders and initiatives? So I think that China and Korea, they have a lot of problems. And I had those problems growing up too, because my parents didn't teach me to question authority. When I went to law school and the professor said, "So, Ms. Chua, what do you think of this judge's opinion?" I had no opinion. I thought, well, a judge wrote it, it must be good. And so that is something we change with our own children. We're always telling them to question authority. Just because somebody tells you something doesn't mean it's right. Now, to close, I want to say that I think, what can we learn from the Asian nations? What can we learn from China? They have a lot of problems, so do we. And here's one thing that I think would be great for the Western nations to learn from China. I think it would be great if we could, the Asian nations are very good at getting their children to focus, at instilling discipline and a hard work ethic in their children when they're very young. And the ability to focus when you're very young is something that will help you through high school, through all your life. especially this day with all these media distractions. I mean, I find it, I always have to check my email. And one thing that my daughter said to me, Sophia, people were saying, how was it raised to be, by this tiger mom? It must have been so stressful in high school. And she said, actually, I think I was less stressed than my friends. And that's because she could sit down and focus for 2 hours. Maybe because of the piano playing or whatever, but if she had a paper due, she could sit down, write the paper, be done by midnight, and then call her friends and do Facebook. As opposed to what most people do, they have, iTunes and iPod and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, everything going on at the same time. Suddenly it's midnight, the paper's not done, they're panicking, they need to get their parents to do it for them. So I think a good combination would be a little bit more focus and self-discipline in our children when they're very young, followed by increasing freedom and questioning authority and letting them pursue their own definitions of success as they get older. And that's really what I learned with Lulu. You just have to start letting go. The last thing I want to say is a lot of people don't understand what the Tiger Mom book is really about, and this is what it has in common with the triple package. In many ways, the Tiger Mom book is a celebration of rebellion. And I bet Esther would be surprised about that. It's a celebration of rebellion. Why? If you read the book, you see that the hero, the protagonist, is my younger daughter, Lulu, the rebel. At the end of the book, I reveal that my father, my idol, my model, that he was a rebel. He was the black sheep in his family. He hated his family. They were too tough, and he left Asia and never looked back. And finally, the entire tone of the Tiger Mom book is rebellious. It is saying, I don't care what everyone else is doing in the West, this is the way that I'm gonna do it. And it's very funny, my mom, who loved the book, she said to me, Amy, no Chinese person would ever have written this book. So that's what I want to end with. I think it would be interesting, rather than fighting parenting wars, black and white, my way's better, this way is better, I think we should all try to learn from each other. We know that different cultures have different strengths and weaknesses. We should listen, and we should all try to learn from each other.
Well, thank you, Amy. That was a very interesting interpretation of the book. I just thought I would tell you a couple of things that I noticed. On the back cover of the book, it says, your publisher wrote, How to Be a Tiger Mother. So this was not really, looked like your publisher did not know that this was supposed to be just a tongue-in-cheek comic book.